a loving mother working tirelessly to provide for her children, 2 daughters with promising futures. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, one that would erupt into a crime so shocking it would leave an entire community in disbelief. This is not just a story of murder, it's a story of betrayal, of a mother's desperate fight to save her daughters from themselves, and of twin sisters who made an unthinkable choice. What drove them to do it? Was it years of hidden resentment? A moment of uncontrollable rage? Or was there something even darker at play? For 4 years, they maintained their innocence. Investigators unraveled a web of lies, and when the truth finally emerged, it was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Stay with us as we uncover the tragic downfall of Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead, the twins who turned on the one person who loved them the most. Because the deeper you dig into this case, the more unsettling the truth becomes. Welcome to the Crime Series. I am glad to have you join us on another video. Kindly subscribe, like, and share. Let me know where you are watching from. Jarmeka Yvonne Nikki Whitehead was born on April 18, 1975, in Georgia. Raised primarily by her grandmother, Della Frazier, Nikki's early life was marked by instability and personal challenges. Her biological parents were largely absent, leaving Della to become the central figure in her upbringing. This early separation from her parents deeply influenced Nikki's views on family and responsibility. She developed a close bond with Della, who was strict but loving and worked hard to instill discipline and self-worth in her granddaughter. Growing up in the working-class neighborhoods of Georgia, Nikki faced economic hardship, emotional strain, and limited access to opportunities. She was exposed to environments where young women often had to grow up quickly. Despite this, Nikki showed signs of independence and ambition early on. She would often help around the house, assist neighbors, and find ways to make small amounts of money, whether through babysitting or doing hair for friends. Her resilience became evident in how she handled adversity, refusing to let her circumstances define her. As a teenager, Nikki faced several hurdles, including the pressures of growing up in a community with limited resources. However, she developed a strong will to succeed and a desire to shape her own path. Nikki had a flair for beauty and style from a young age. Friends and family often recall how she enjoyed experimenting with hair, makeup, and fashion. These interests would later become the foundation of her professional career. She began practicing hairstyling on herself and friends, eventually building a small client base in her neighborhood. Determined to build a better future, Nikki pursued a career in cosmetology. She became a licensed beautician and quickly earned a reputation for her warm personality, professionalism, and dedication to her craft. Clients appreciated her ability to connect on a personal level while delivering quality service. Her work as a hairstylist gave her both financial independence and a sense of identity. Nikki's clientele grew through word of mouth, and she began to see a future where she could open her own salon. She was ambitious, often setting goals and writing down plans in notebooks she kept at her workstation. In addition to her work in salons, Nikki's ambitions led her to further her education. She enrolled at Bauder College in Atlanta, focusing on fashion and design. Her goal was to combine her love of beauty with formal training to elevate her career to the next level. At the age of 18, Nikki Whitehead gave birth to identical twin daughters, Jasmia Kanisha and Tasmia Janisha Whitehead, on November 27, 1993. Becoming a teenage mother presented its own set of challenges, especially without a stable partner or long-term support system. Nikki tried to continue pursuing her goals, but the demands of parenting 2 infants made life difficult. She juggled multiple roles, mother, provider, and young woman, trying to find her place in the world. The responsibility was immense, and Nikki was often overwhelmed. Nikki frequently turned to her grandmother, Della Frazier, for help. Della, who had raised Nikki herself, stepped in to provide structure and stability. The twins lived primarily with Della throughout their early years. She enrolled them in school, made sure they had proper meals, and gave them a sense of consistency that Nikki, caught between jobs and relationships, struggled to maintain. Della became the foundation of the household, ensuring that the girls had a nurturing environment and instilling in them the values she had long held. As daughters, Jasmia and Tasmia were described as energetic and intelligent. They shared a close bond, often finishing each other's sentences and playing together constantly. Their matching outfits and mirrored personalities made them stand out. To the outside world, they appeared to be happy, thriving children. Visitors and neighbors would often comment on their good manners and how inseparable they were. The girls were often seen riding their bikes or participating in after-school activities with each other. By the time the twins reached elementary school, they were known as bright students. Teachers noted their academic strengths and respectful behavior. They were involved in Girl Scouts and participated in school events. From the outside, there were no obvious signs of trouble. Their grades were solid, and they appeared well-adjusted. But the emotional distance between the girls and Nikki continued to grow. Underneath the surface, dynamics were shifting. Nikki was growing frustrated with her secondary role in her daughter's lives. She wanted to reclaim custody and play a more active part. The twins, however, saw Della as their primary guardian and were less receptive to Nikki's efforts. The tension simmered quietly, rarely visible to outsiders but deeply felt within the family. This growing tension would remain largely unnoticed for years, but it planted the first seeds of conflict that would one day erupt into something tragic and irreversible. As the twins entered their teenage years, the relationship between mother and daughters would become more strained, laying the groundwork for a story that would eventually make national headlines. By 2007, Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead were 13 years old. Nikki Whitehead had been a sporadic presence in their early years, more involved in building her own life than in day-to-day parenting. Nikki had a complicated history, struggling with stability and consistency. She had long desired to reconnect with her daughters, believing that regaining custody would allow her to fulfill her responsibilities as their mother. The twins, however, viewed Nikki as more of a distant relative than a parent. Their emotional attachment was rooted in their life with Della, who provided them with a structured, nurturing environment. Nikki's attempts to reclaim her role were seen by the girls as disruptive. Despite the twins' resistance, the court granted Nikki temporary custody as part of a reunification plan. The goal was to repair the strained mother-daughter relationship and integrate them into a stable household under Nikki's supervision. The transition into Nikki's household quickly turned volatile. The family's attempts to reconnect were marred by constant tension. Verbal arguments erupted frequently, and as emotions escalated, some incidents became physical. According to later records, the girls pushed back against Nikki's authority, questioning her rules and lifestyle. Nikki, meanwhile, tried to enforce structure and discipline, which the girls interpreted as controlling and hypocritical. These differences led to shouting matches, slammed doors, and repeated disruptions that alarmed neighbors and friends. The domestic issues did not go unnoticed. Police were called to the home on multiple occasions due to reports of disturbances. Social services got involved, leading to court-mandated counseling for both Nikki and the twins. Sessions focused on conflict resolution and communication, but they failed to address the deep-rooted resentment and emotional distance that had developed over years of separation. Therapists noted a lack of trust and emotional connection, and school officials began observing behavioral changes in the girls, including mood swings and declining academic performance. Eventually, the situation reached a breaking point. The juvenile court intervened again and reversed the decision, returning custody of the twins to Della Frazier. Though the move brought temporary relief, it did not resolve the underlying issues. The twins continued to harbor anger toward their mother, and Nikki remained determined to regain her place in their lives. She saw their resistance as unfair and unjustified, often expressing that she was trying to make up for lost time. On January 5, 2010, after a long custody battle, a Rockdale County Juvenile Court made a critical decision. The judge ordered that the twins move back in with Nikki for a 2-week trial period to assess whether they could reconcile and live together under one roof. This decision came despite vocal objections from the girls and concerns about past violent encounters in the home. According to reports, both girls were devastated by the ruling and made it clear that they did not want to live with their mother. Family members later recalled that the twins pleaded with the court and other relatives not to be sent back. They felt that Nikki was controlling and hypocritical, often criticizing them for behavior she had once engaged in herself. Nikki, on the other hand, believed that regaining custody was her chance to repair the damaged relationship and take responsibility for raising her daughters. She was reportedly hopeful, but cautious. Despite the court's hopes for reconciliation, the reality in the Whitehead home told a different story. Della Frazier expressed deep concern over the court's decision, but had no authority to override it. Friends and school staff who interacted with the twins in the days after their return to Nikki's home noticed subtle but troubling changes in their behavior. Teachers reported that the twins seemed distracted, less engaged, and occasionally confrontational. The girls, once known for their academic discipline, appeared emotionally unmoored. In the home, tensions escalated with each passing day. Nikki reportedly attempted to enforce new rules and structure, including curfews, chores, and restrictions on phone and internet usage. These efforts, while meant to establish boundaries, were interpreted by the twins as punishments. Without any support services in place to mediate the situation, the household grew more volatile. Heated arguments became common, and the emotional gap between mother and daughters widened. School counselors later testified that the girls had visited them multiple times during that week. They expressed frustration, anger, and hopelessness about their living situation. Tasmia allegedly wrote in her journal about wanting to run away or be removed from the home entirely. Jasmia confided in a friend that she couldn't take it anymore. Though these red flags were noted, they did not result in immediate intervention. Privately, Nikki reached out to close friends to vent about the challenges she was facing. She told one friend that the girls were out of control and that she feared they might physically attack her one day. Yet she held on to the hope that things would settle down. Nikki wanted to be a part of her daughters' lives, even if it meant enduring temporary discomfort. That hope would be short-lived. If you found this story compelling and appreciate the way we bring real-life cases to you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue to uncover the truth and share these important stories. Like, share, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. On the morning of January 13, 2010, a disturbing emergency call was triggered in the quiet Bridle Ridge Walk subdivision of Conyers, Georgia. One of the 16-year-old Whitehead twins flagged down a passing police officer, claiming they had just discovered their mother, Nikki Whitehead, dead inside their home. When law enforcement entered the house, they were met with a horrific scene that would haunt even the most seasoned officers. Nikki's body was found submerged in a bathtub in the master bathroom. She had been attacked multiple times and beaten with force. The autopsy later revealed she had defensive wounds on her hands and arms, indicating a desperate struggle to protect herself from her attackers. Her face and upper body bore deep injuries, and her body was covered in bruises consistent with force trauma. The room was soaked in blood, with spatters reaching the walls and mirror. The home showed clear signs of a violent confrontation. There were drag marks on the floor, suggesting her body had been moved from the living room into the bedroom, and finally into the bathroom. A broken vase, used as one of the weapons, was found near the living room. Police quickly determined that the attack had started in the common areas and ended in the bathroom, pointing to a sustained personal conflict. When police first arrived, the twins, Jasmia and Tasmia, appeared distraught. The first few hours after the discovery of Nikki's body were focused on gathering preliminary information. The house was sealed as a crime scene, and the girls were taken to the police station. There, they were questioned separately in recorded interviews. Both claimed they had left home early for school, but missed the bus, prompting them to walk. They described seeing blood and chaos upon their return, expressing shock and horror. However, this part of their story started to unravel quickly. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station revealed that the girls had not walked to school as they claimed. Instead, they stopped at the gas station and accepted a ride from a stranger. The video time-stamped their presence there much later than when they said they had left the house. More inconsistencies emerged. The school's surveillance footage confirmed that the girls arrived 2 hours late. Police began questioning the authenticity of their timeline. When asked if they were still wearing the same clothes they wore to school, the girls said yes. But these were the same clothes they had worn inside the bloody home, and investigators feared key evidence might be on them. In addition, officers noticed the girls were wearing gloves indoors, an unusual detail. When asked to remove the gloves, visible scratches, bite marks, and other injuries were observed on both girls. When questioned, they claimed the wounds resulted from a fight with each other. Later, they altered the story, saying the injuries were self-inflicted habits from nervous behavior. The explanations raised more questions than answers. The girls tried to maintain a consistent story, but the changing details caught the attention of detectives. Their interactions were carefully monitored and recorded. Investigators began to see them not just as possible witnesses, but as key individuals whose behavior and statements were no longer aligning with physical evidence. Detectives also uncovered letters written by Jasmia to her boyfriend, expressing hatred toward her mother and a wish for her to die. These written words revealed a deeper emotional conflict within the household. One letter read, "I just hate living here being with her." And in another, "I told her I wish she were dead, and she really did die." While the girls were released to their great-grandmother after the initial interviews, police began building a case. Forensic teams collected evidence from the home. Bite mark comparisons and crime scene reconstruction all pointed to someone familiar with the house. By the end of that day, law enforcement was no longer convinced the girls had only discovered the scene. Suspicion had taken root. After months of investigation, surveillance, and interviews, the case against Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead reached a breaking point. The police had gathered physical evidence, inconsistencies in their stories, and behavioral cues that contradicted their initial claims of innocence. When the twins were finally arrested in May 2010, 4 months after their mother's murder, they were placed in separate interrogation rooms. It was there that their stories began to fully unravel. Initially, both girls denied involvement. They repeated the story they had told on the day of the murder, that they came home from school and found their mother dead. But as detectives pressed harder and revealed the extent of the evidence, including bite marks, surveillance footage, and witness statements, the pressure became too much to bear. The girls were aware that their cover story was collapsing. Their movements on the day of the murder did not match what they told police. Surveillance video showed them walking to a gas station and hitching a ride, rather than going directly to school as claimed. Forensic investigators noted drag marks consistent with someone moving Nikki's body. The gloves they wore in the house raised more suspicion. It was during these interrogations that cracks in their narrative widened. Faced with overwhelming contradictions and forensic findings, both girls eventually broke down and confessed to killing their mother. The confessions were recorded on video, capturing every detail of the events that took place on January 13, 2010. Their confessions, though separate, told nearly identical stories. They gave matching descriptions of the fight, the weapons used, and how it all ended. The truth was no longer hidden. It was documented, word for word, from the mouths of the girls who had once claimed to be innocent. According to their statements, the day had started with an argument over school and discipline. Nikki, frustrated with her daughter's behavior, confronted them. The confrontation escalated quickly. Both girls described the situation as chaotic. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and a physical struggle began. In their account, Nikki struck one of them with a pot, and in retaliation the fight turned violent. They admitted to grabbing whatever they could find, knives, a vase, and attacking their mother. The struggle moved through different parts of the house. At some point, Nikki tried to defend herself and bit one of the girls, which explained the bite marks found on the twins. Eventually, they dragged her into the bathroom, where she was found submerged in the tub. The confessions revealed that after the fight, the twins attempted to clean themselves and remove any signs of struggle before calling for help. They changed clothes and tried to act as if they had discovered the crime scene instead of creating it. The twins claimed they did not plan the murder. They said it happened in the heat of the moment, fueled by years of unresolved anger and resentment. However, prosecutors pointed out the brutality of the attack. Nikki had been beaten and stabbed repeatedly, with injuries so severe that her spinal cord was nearly severed. The crime was personal, not random. Their taped confessions showed young people torn between regret and justification. At moments, they cried. At others, they tried to explain why they felt pushed to the edge. These confessions sealed the case for the prosecution. What was once a mystery had now become a detailed and disturbing account of a family torn apart from within. The video evidence removed any lingering doubt. The once celebrated honor roll students were now self-confessed killers. There would be no trial by jury, no cross-examinations. Just the harsh reality of two young people who had taken their mother's life and could no longer hide from what they had done. By 2014, after nearly 4 years of delays, investigations, and pre-trial hearings, the legal process for Jasmiyah and Tasmiyah Whitehead reached a turning point. The twins, once seen as promising honor roll students and Girl Scouts, now stood before the court as admitted participants in the violent killing of their mother, Jarmeka Nikki Whitehead. Their journey from bright students to defendants in a high-profile homicide case stunned their community and left a deep mark on the criminal justice system. Originally charged with malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault, both girls had pleaded not guilty in 2010. Their defense attorneys spent years challenging the admissibility of evidence, including surveillance footage, interrogation tapes, and the physical signs of struggle found on the twins' bodies. At the same time, prosecutors continued building a robust case that combined forensic analysis, witness accounts, and the twins' own changing stories over time. In early 2014, after significant legal wrangling, both girls accepted a plea agreement. They each pleaded guilty to murder, armed robbery, and possession of a knife during the commission of a crime. The decision to accept the plea deal was influenced by several factors: the violent nature of the crime, the presence of confessions, DNA and bite mark evidence, and the psychological and family history introduced by the defense. The courtroom was subdued as the guilty pleas were entered. The twins, now 20 years old, stood before the judge. The judge heard statements from both sides. Prosecutors emphasized the brutality of the crime, while the defense outlined the years of turmoil the girls experienced, including their volatile relationship with their mother and the abrupt shift in custody that placed them in a tense household environment. The plea agreement spared the family and community a drawn-out trial, which would have included emotional testimony from relatives and extensive media attention. The judge handed down a sentence of 30 years in prison for each twin. Though some believed the sentence was too lenient for the severity of the crime, others saw it as a measured response, considering the twins' age, their prior lack of criminal history, and the mental and emotional strain they reportedly endured. As part of their sentence, Jasmiyah and Tasmiyah were transferred to the Georgia Department of Corrections and placed in separate prisons to prevent further influence over each other. Jasmiyah was sent to Pulaski State Prison, while Tasmiyah was placed in Arundel State Prison. Their separation marked a shift in how authorities handled the case, viewing them now as individuals rather than a unit. Public reactions to the sentencing varied. Advocates for victims' rights felt the full weight of justice was not applied, while others, including some psychological experts, highlighted the importance of rehabilitation over retribution. The sentencing also reopened discussions on how the juvenile justice system handles violent crimes committed by minors, especially in cases involving complex family abuse histories. In the years since their sentencing, both sisters have participated in various prison rehabilitation programs. Their eligibility for parole remains under review, with Tasmia's tentative parole month set for March 2026 and Jasmia's for September 2027. Whether they will be released then depends on multiple factors, including behavior, program participation, and public safety assessments. Ultimately, the court's decision marked the conclusion of one of Georgia's most tragic and complicated family murder cases. It left behind unanswered questions about intervention, juvenile justice, and the consequences of unresolved family conflict. Nikki Whitehead's death sent shockwaves through her family and the local community. While the crime itself drew national attention, it was the deeply personal reflections from those closest to her that revealed the full scope of the tragedy. For many, Nikki was more than the headlines suggested. She was remembered as a woman trying to rebuild her life and reconnect with her children after years of strained relationships. Friends recalled her vibrant personality, love for fashion, and her desire to give her daughters a better life. Nikki had not always been present during the twins' early years, but those who knew her say she was actively working to change that. Her mother, Barbara, and grandmother, Della Frazier, were devastated by the loss. Della, who had raised the twins for most of their lives, expressed feelings of guilt and heartbreak. She had seen the tensions building, but never imagined the outcome would be fatal. Barbara, Nikki's mother, described feeling as if she had lost her entire family in one day. To them, the betrayal added another layer of pain. It wasn't just that Nikki had been murdered, it was that her own daughters, whom she fought to reconnect with, were the ones responsible. Friends say this fact haunted those closest to Nikki, especially knowing how much she believed in second chances. One family friend, who had known Nikki since childhood, recalled how she had always spoken of her dreams for the twins. She wanted them to be better than she was. She used to say that all the time. Nikki didn't have it easy growing up, but she believed her girls could have a future full of opportunities, she said. That dream, however, would never be realized. For Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead, their lives have unfolded behind high-security fences, under constant surveillance, and within the rigid structure of the Georgia prison system. To prevent them from influencing each other or rekindling their codependent dynamic, authorities housed the sisters in separate facilities. Tasmia was placed at Arundel State Prison, while Jasmia was assigned to Pulaski State Prison. Arundel and Pulaski are both medium security facilities for women. They offer programs in education, counseling, and vocational training. According to prison records and public reports, both twins have participated in available rehabilitation programs. These include GED courses, anger management classes, and faith-based group counseling. While neither has spoken publicly since their sentencing, correctional staff have noted that they are generally compliant with institutional rules. In prison, inmates live by a strict schedule. The day starts early with roll call and multiple head counts throughout the day. Meals are served at scheduled times, followed by work assignments and program attendance. The twins, like all inmates, must follow a strict code of conduct. Privileges such as phone calls, visits, and commissary purchases are earned based on behavior and participation in facility programs. With tentative parole months set for March 2026 for Tasmia and September 2027 for Jasmia, attention has turned to the possibility of their release. More than a decade has passed since the brutal of Jarmeka Nikki Whitehead, and the case remains fresh in the minds of many who followed it from the beginning. As the parole dates draw closer, the public has become increasingly vocal about whether the twins should be allowed to return to society. Georgia's parole system allows for inmates to be considered for release based on several factors, including behavior in prison, participation in rehabilitation programs, completion of educational milestones, and psychological assessments. Prison staff records indicate that both have had relatively clean disciplinary records, which is a key component in parole evaluations. Supporters of their release argue that the twins were only years old at the time of the crime, and their actions were the tragic result of years of unresolved family dysfunction and emotional instability. If this story moved you, disturbed you, or opened your eyes, subscribe to our channel for more real-life crime documentaries and fictional stories inspired by true events. We uncover the darkest corners of human nature, so you can be more aware, more informed, and maybe even safer. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something just isn't right.